Hi, and welcome to How Humans Heal. I'm Dr. Donnie Wilson, and today I'm really excited to have this conversation with my friend Tricia Nelson. She is an emotional eating expert, which means that she's written a best-selling book and has done all kinds of speaking, including on TEDx and in the media. And she also has her own Heal Your Hunger show where she helps people break the patterns of emotional eating. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tricia.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's such an important topic, and I know you've also been inspired by your own story of solving emotional eating. So maybe let's start there. Like, how did you do it? How did you break this pattern for yourself, and what did that look like?
Absolutely. Well, it goes way back in terms of my emotional eating. I think I was an emotional eater from a very young age. I mean, I can remember being so excited about food. So like I just love to eat. So I like to eat, I like to cook, I like to serve food to other people. It was just a big highlight for me. And I never like when I had a sister that came and I was overweight. Like as a teen, I started to put on weight as an adolescent and hated it. I hated being overweight. And by age 21 or so, I was 50 pounds overweight, and that was really tough for me. I'm 5'6". I definitely could see it. Um, and I had a sister that came home one day and announced that she was an emotional eater. And I just thought that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. So I thought it was dumb. And I thought, I'm definitely not an emotional eater. I just like food. So that was my response to that. But you can't unhear it once you hear it. And what I started to do, Donnie, is like observe my habits around food. And I realized, I'm not that normal around food. Like it's very obvious that, I eat differently than my friends. Like we'd go out to like a Donnies or something like that, and they would order a sandwich and it would come with fries. So they'd eat their sandwich and pick up their fries. Well, I would eat my fries and pick up my sandwich. I'd be like, and I'd look around, I'd be like, how can you leave French fries on your plate, for goodness sake? That's the best part. And so that's really, where I started to see that, or somebody would have like a hot fudge sundae and they'd eat part of it and then they'd push it aside and be like, oh, I'm full. And I think, what does full have to do with it? So I realized that maybe it's not just that I like food, like maybe there's a little bit more here. And then, I began to be a binger. So I would eat a lot of food in one sitting, not intending to. Like I get chips and ice cream and cookies for a Friday night, watching, a bingeable TV show or something. And I would binge and on the food, and then I'd feel really, really full. And I'd hate myself. Like I'd be like, oh my God, what did you just do? And why did you just do that? Like you feel awful. So this was kind of how it was for me. Fast forward to answer your question, I started doing different things to try to deal with this problem. Once I realized I had a problem, and it ranged everything from diets to exercise programs to pills and potions and lotions and eventually 12-step programs, self-help books, therapy. I went to an eating disorders therapist twice a week for a whole year. So I was really, covering all the bases of how to deal with this thing, like on an external diet way, an internal psychological way. But honestly, it didn't really make a dent in the problem. And so what happened for me is I was very blessed at one point to feel so discouraged by my quest that I kind of thought, I can't diet anymore because I just go up and down. Like I lose all this weight. I look great in my clothes. And then like a second later, I'm back up the scale. And so I just thought I can't diet anymore. And that was a turning point for me because if I'm not going to diet, I was still wanting to do something. And that's when I was very blessed to meet somebody who showed me how to deal with the emotional eating piece. Because I wasn't ignorant of diet. It's like, or of what is a healthy nutritional plan. Like you eat vegetables, you eat organic vegetables, you eat good proteins and fats and low burning, like slow burning carbs. Like that's all pretty much, like everybody knows that. But how do you do that? And that's, to me, what the emotional piece was, that was missing, is how do you follow through on what you know? And so I got help with that. And then, of course, I then began helping other people. Then it evolved into Heal Your Hunger and the step-by-step process that I developed to help others heal. And I've been doing that for several years now. And I'm very grateful. My weight is stabilized. I help other people lose weight without ever making weight loss the goal.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. And there's so much in what you just shared that I want to go back to and point out and clarify. Like, one thing is, you started by even saying how when your sister said something about emotional eating. I mean, at first we kind of like, probably if a person's almost like, if you find yourself a little defensive or protective around that, is that a sign that it might be an issue? Or how does a person know that this might be something going on for them? Because sometimes it's right in front of us, but we don't realize it, right?
It's true. And emotional eating it's like not the sexiest of terms. So somebody might have resistance to calling themselves an emotional eater, which is totally understandable. And I actually have a quiz that I suggest people take, and it's an emotional eating quiz where you find out if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. And that speaks to the spectrum of emotional eating. So we're not all in the same place in our relationship with food. Like, everybody's got a different relationship with food, and it evolves and it changes. And, it's a relationship. It's like a lifelong relationship. You can't get away from it. We all have a relationship with food. But in this spectrum of emotional eating, some people have a lot of control and very few consequences. They're on the low end of the spectrum. Okay. So somebody who goes on a cruise, let's say, and they eat a lot of, bread and cheese and drink the wine because it's all prepaid for, and you go through the dessert buffet line, and, they put on 5 pounds during the cruise. They come home and they're like, ugh, my pants don't fit the way they were fitting. I'm going to cut out sweets and jog, an extra 10 miles for the next couple of weeks, like to extra 10 miles a week. And within, a couple of weeks to a month, those 5 pounds are off. So that's somebody with a good amount of control, right? To course correct and very few consequences. 5 pounds, your jeans are snug, not that big a deal. So that's somebody on the low end of the spectrum. The high end of the spectrum is really food addiction. And that's certainly where I was, in that I would have these big binges. So I would lose control. Like, I would eat way more than I intended on many occasions. And then when you do that long enough, the consequences add up. Like, your body starts talking back to you. You have aches and pains, you have joint pain, you have inflammation, you have issues in your gut, right? So many people that you help are suffering from their food choices and food amounts, right, that they're eating. And our bodies can only take it for so long before they start talking back to us. High cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure. It's like the list goes on and on. So that's somebody with, mounting consequences and very little control. So that's on the higher end of the spectrum. And to me, emotional eating and food addiction, these are just terms. Like I say, don't worry about the terms. We got to call it something. But the point is, we're on a spectrum of not feeling great about our relationship with food, feeling out of control more often than we'd like, and also having results we don't like our pants not fitting. I used to have 5 different sizes of pants in my closet because I was on that yo-yo roller coaster ride, and I never knew what size I was going to be. So I was holding out hope for those skinny jeans, but I was often not there. So this is kind of what the journey looks like. And it's a frustrating one, especially when you are most of the time dieting. Like emotional eaters are on the higher end of that spectrum. They're usually dieting. Life is not a picnic. They're usually in diet mode. They've certainly got the training from diets of deprivation, right? Going on the diet. And everybody around them shakes their head and says, I don't see a whole lot of change going on here. It's one thing after another. So it's a frustrating journey, and the good news is there's another way. You don't have to diet in order to reach your goals.
And I think that sounds like one of the most common symptoms, or the way you might identify this for yourself, is feeling frustrated about your relationship with food, as you called it, which I think is a really, because this relationship with food is so important. As you mentioned, as humans, we have to eat. Like, that's not, we survive by eating. So it's not like we can just decide not to eat. I mean, sometimes
Right.
it gets to that point, and that's a whole nother side of this would be under eating, right? And it can be some of the same symptoms, right? It starts to show up in different ways in our house if we're under eating. So it's like, how do we, it's between under eating and overeating, how do we get to this optimal relationship with food and way of feeding ourselves that's the foods our bodies need in the way our body can use it so that we can feel good? And it can be, it's not something we learn from a young age. So we learn different things, right? Like, how much of this do you find starts from childhood patterns of eating?
Most of the time, I would say almost often. I mean, almost all the time. Once in a while, somebody will start having these patterns in their 40s, right, as their bodies are changing with menopause, but perimenopause. But most of the time, if somebody's a chronic dieter, a chronic like weight loss, loser and gainer, just it's a struggle for them lifelong. It starts at a very young age. And I was just talking to my clients about this, on a group call. I just said, food at one time saved our lives. Like at one time, I had sexual abuse as a kid. Like things were not all rosy, in my childhood. I mean, it wasn't a bad childhood, but there were problems for sure. And so my line of defense, the only line of defense I had was food, maybe fantasy, maybe a few other things, but escape, but TV, of course, but mostly it was food. Because when you're a kid and you're in pain and there's dysfunction in your family or abuse, you have to do something to kill that pain. And you're not going to score drugs at 5 years old, So usually, you reach for food because it's acceptable and it works. I mean, sugar and carbs worked at a time in my life when I needed to kill the pain I was in, when I needed something to make me feel good because I didn't feel good. And so you're so right on. Like, it starts at a young age. And what once saved my life at some point as an adult started backfiring on me and ruining my life. Like, it made me depressed. It made me feel bad about myself. It made me embarrassed. I had shame around my body size, and my lack of control. So it turns on you. And then the health problems, of course. So it starts at a young age. It served us at one time. So I always tell people, like be gentle with yourself, because this was a coping strategy. Like, this is how you got through. This is how you didn't jump off a bridge when things were going really wrong in your life. Like, this is how you got through. It's just that it's not servicing us anymore.
And I find that a lot of times it is that learning compassion for ourselves, that learning how to be gentle in our inner conversations, that actually shifts the pattern, right? Like you're saying, it doesn't help to be hard on yourself for something in the past. We have to learn how to be gentle with ourselves. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, it's like we were trying to get by. Like, let's be like gentle. Like, first of all, we're so hard on ourselves. And I will say that is a trait in my work. I have something, it's in my book and in my courses, that I have something called the anatomy of the emotional eater. And this is 24 personality traits that make up the emotional eater's personality, because it's not about the food, right? And you can't just fix your diet and be happy. Like, you're not going to stay on that plan if you don't go deeper. So these personality traits have nothing to do with food, but they do have to do with why we end up eating. And I'll give you a good example of that and then, get back to your question. But one of the top traits of the emotional eater is people pleasing. So this is one of the anatomy of the emotional eater traits. And the reason why that does have something to do with food is we typically, again, back from our childhood, if we didn't get a strong sense of ourselves or self-esteem, we're looking outside ourselves for validation. If I bust my butt on this project at work, am I going to get kudos? Are people going to recognize me? Am I going to get a raise? Right. So we get in this pattern of overdoing, right, which is another trait of overeaters, as we overdo. And so we don't put boundaries on our time because we're people pleasing. We want people to be happy with the job we're doing, or we're the ones that are staying up late baking the brownies for the soccer team, the next day or whatever. So when we do this overdoing and people pleasing, nobody's ever as pleased as we plan on them being. Just truth, right? Like some people don't even notice. And then we're resentful. We're kind of like, hey, I did all this work and I barely got a thank you. So not only are we burned out because we just exhausted ourselves, right? Tapped out our adrenals, trying to be superwoman and get recognition, but then we're also super resentful. And that is like the perfect storm for what I like to call the I deserve it binge. Like, screw them. They're not going to recognize me. I'm going to get my favorite goodies and go home and reward myself. So that's an example of how the trait of people pleasing ends up in a binge. And so it's not the binge we need to chase after a solution for. We need to chase after a solution for people pleasing, because that is so at the root of so much of our eating, that and other things. So another thing is being super hard on ourselves, like you were mentioning. It's one of the anatomy of the emotional eater traits is that we are so self-critical, like relentless on ourselves, and this is something that needs to be addressed, because you can't hate yourself into doing the right thing. Like, it just doesn't work. And so that internal conversation, like you were talking about, of being self-compassionate, of being sweet to ourselves, like, this is really more than a relationship with food that we're looking to heal. We're looking to heal a relationship with ourselves, right? And that internal conversation and self-care. Like, self-care is such an important part of the healing journey and healing our relationship with food, because, we can't be an overdoer and not overeat. Like, overdoing leads to overeating. So if we're going to eat less, we have to deal with the overdoing. We have to start putting boundaries on our time. We have to let somebody else do the extra credit project or bake the brownies for the soccer team. We have to start saying no, which is not an easy thing for us to do, but it has to happen. It's like, we don't have an eating problem, we have a living problem. Let's address the living problem, and it will directly affect our eating. That's why you can lose weight without dieting if you focus on the deeper problem, which is all the stress, right? Coming back to your work, the stress that leads to stress eating. Like, we cannot, people go on diets, and diets don't work because you change your way of eating, but if you don't change your way of living, you still have that same amount of stress that requires that amount of food, right? So if you want eat less food and be happy about it, I mean, we all know how to starve ourselves, but eat less food and not need more than that, you have to change your stress level. You cannot be superwoman and burning the candle at both ends and not expect to be eating at the end of the night, trying to catch up.
Are you ready to discover your unique stress type? We're all affected by stress, but why fight it when you can master it? Take my free online stress type quiz today and conquer your burnout. We'll measure your energy, sleep, mood, focus, and body to determine how your body is built to deal with stress. Then we'll work together to take precise action to help you get out of stress mode and become resilient to it. It's time to master your health. Let's go. No, it's such a great point. I mean, I definitely do find, like, in my work, when I'm helping people to restore healthy adrenal function, right? Like, if a person has high or low cortisol, or high or low adrenaline, or for that matter, the neurotransmitters, if serotonin's depleted, then it's like, and those are the effects of stress, right? Stress causes these disruptions in our stress hormones and our neurotransmitters, and that's a perfect setup for stress eating and emotional eating, because we're not going to feel good, and we're going to, like you said, you explained so well, we're going to reach for something. And it might be, for sometimes it's reaching for alcohol, sometimes it's reaching for some other substance or activity, but a lot of times it's reaching for food, and specifically like something carb or sugar heavy. And so then we're taught in our societies, oh, we just need to go for a diet, right? And this is where now the term diet is like, I think it's so misused, right? Like you said, like I love when you said one of your turning points in this was you said, I'm not going to diet anymore, because you realized that the diet itself was what was perpetuating the cycle. Yeah. And as you've explained over and over again, it's like the more we just chase after the diet, it's just going to land us right back where we started again.
100%. Yeah.
So it's like, how do we, even though we've been brainwashed to think we're supposed to go on a diet to lose weight, how do we, and people, even I find, will be very afraid to even set that aside, right? If I set aside the diet, does that mean I'm going to gain weight more? How do you help people navigate that?
So, so much of what we have to do is we have to really get rid of that idea of the diet culture, deprivation, eating less by hook or by crook, because it won't last. 90% of all diets fail. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice if just a day at a time we pivoted, and started focusing on self-care instead of self-control or self-deprivation. Self-care. And I teach something called the 6 self-care success secrets, which are meditation, prayer, reading spiritual literature, writing, talking, and walking. And at first, I don't even want people to do hard exercise, because when you come from diet culture, you exercise for weight loss, you exercise for calorie burn. It's hard to get it out of your head that I'm going to burn so many calories when I'm exercising. And, I find that walking is one of those in-between things. You're exercising, but you're being gentle on your body, and you're not in that drive to lose weight. And so I think it's just really important that we realize that self-care, like, again, this is part of making peace with ourselves, is that we have more balance in our lives, where we're starting our day with some kind of morning routine that can reduce our stress. I'm a daily meditator because the benefits are amazing. It's like I lower my stress. I like to call it, Donnie, putting money in my spiritual bank account. So I make deposits in the morning with like spiritual readings, meditation, prayer, walking, just something that can fit. And you don't have to be religious to do this. It's just filling your cup, with like spiritual nourishment. If it's walking in nature, it's like fill your cup first thing in the morning, so that, or fill your bank account if it were, so later in the day, as the stress piles up, you can make, withdrawals. Right? You're not on empty. You can make withdrawals. And because normally that's when we reach for chocolate, and caffeine and other things, is when we're depleted late in the day. We all get that slump, no matter what. It's like you've added stress, hour after hour throughout the day. And when I used to do those things, I now, because I've put money in my spiritual bank account, I'm in the black. Like I can take some withdrawals to recharge. I do like meditation in the afternoon as well, a short meditation, so that I can recharge, and then I don't need the food for that. But that's all part of self-care. Like that's managing our stress. Like I just traveled for like 10 days, and I went to 3 different cities. And I was really tired afterwards. I thought, you know what? That probably wasn't the best choice. Like it's taking me several days to restore. And I'm like, you know what? That wasn't good self-care. Like that was too much. I'm 56 years old. Like that's probably, I need to kind of like do things differently next time. So like I've noted that, right? I'm not Superwoman, and I don't want to use food to fuel me, or drinks or whatever. So I'm going to have to change how I'm living. Again, focus on the living problem, not the eating problem, in order to heal.
I love that first of all, I love the use of self-care. I also use the acronym for care, and I use it as C for clean eating, A for adequate sleep, R for recovery activities, which are some of these activities you've just been mentioning, and E for exercise or movement. And it's so, to me, I agree with you. It's so fundamental that when we can, and it takes practice. And in fact, I think really that our human existence is all about practicing our self-care, right? We have to, like you just used as an example, we have to put ourselves into experiences and be the observer and the compassionate, loving one to say, hey, I think I pushed myself a little too hard. Next time I plan travel, I'm going to do it slightly differently so that I can take better care of myself and make sure I'm getting the food I need when I need it and the sleep and the recovery activities so that I can get through. Because it's not about doing nothing, right? It's not, we're not going to turn off and avoid everything in our life.
No.
It's how do we do it in living our life?
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, that's why the quick fix of diets is so alluring, because we're like, oh, that's too much self-care. That's too much work. Well, 40 years of dieting is a lot of work too. Like, we don't think about that. We're just focused on the diet in the moment, but we have sort of amnesia around all the other diets we've done and all the quick fixes that didn't fix anything, right? So the tortoise way of doing this, and which is adopting self-care habits, having community, right? Community is very important for being able to make these changes that are kind of counterculture, like slowing down and taking care of yourself is not exactly, our cultural mantra. And so being around a community that is doing that is super important. But these are, this is new for us. This is totally new for us. But it's not a quick fix, but it actually does fix things, a day at a time. When we, like you said, it takes practice and we accumulate, over time, accumulate days of doing this, our bodies will totally love us for it.
That's the cool thing is when people start to really feel the difference and feel better and they're like, I can do this, it's working. And and then you get this momentum. But I want to come back to something you just mentioned related to community, and that what do you recommend for people when say the people in their life are not understanding or on board, or especially say with holidays or events or times when humans tend to overconsume? What can people do to help navigate those situations?
It's hard. It's hard. It does make people uncomfortable if you're trying to eat clean and you say no to desserts, right? Especially on Bessie's pie, let's say, or a special whatever fondue. Who cares?
A wedding cake or
wedding cake, yeah. So I just had a group call with clients, and I literally said, if you say no, first of all, no thank you is your friend. At holidays, no thank you, without explanation. Like, you do not have to explain yourself. I'm on a diet, or I'm on this new plan, or I'm on this regimen. Like, just, you do not have to explain. You do not owe anybody an explanation. No thank you is enough. Like, no thank you. Or I like to say, no thank you, I'm good. Because it's like that's just all that needs to be said. I'm good. I am good. Right. So I just say, no, I'm good. Thank you. Or whatever.
Why sometimes people worry, or they're like, are you okay? Or
and it's like, no, I'm good.
Conversation.
Yeah. I've had enough. It's so simple. But if, once in a while you get somebody who's just not satisfied with no thank you. Right. And they push. They're kind of like, oh, come on. They cajole and push. And I just finished saying this to my clients, like, that's their stuff. That is not your responsibility. If they are uncomfortable with your saying no, it's their stuff that's making them push. Like, they want you to eat so they feel okay eating, right? That is not your job to take care of their feelings, or they slaved making that pie. Doesn't matter. They can deal with it. They can serve it to somebody else. It is not your job to eat pie for them, so that they're happy and feel like they're worth something. And so much, especially as emotional leaders, so much of the time we are taking extra responsibility, or we're taking responsibility for people's feelings that's not ours to take. It's just not ours to take. We need boundaries. Like, we don't have to take care of people's feelings, and when we're uncomfortable saying no, because feelings will come up when we say no, we can just sit through them. It lasts like maybe 30 seconds of people looking at you and prodding you or whatever. Just don't think, I'm good. Just smile, compliment them. It looks so good. Oh my gosh, you must have worked so hard on that. Looks amazing. Thank you. I'm good. I've had enough. and then let that be it, but if you compliment them, it gets them off of your case a little bit faster too.
It's so good. And I know that you're soon offering a quit sugar challenge. Tell us more about that. How is this helping people? What are you going to be doing in this challenge?
Yeah, so this is something I do once in a while because sugar was such a problem for me. I was sugar and carbs, and of course, carbs metabolizes sugar in our bodies. So it was sugar when it comes down to it, and so sugar and flour, carby foods, and so it helped me so much, Donnie, when I learned about all the places sugar hides in our foods because I had quit sugar, but then I'd always gone back to it, and then it'd be like, oh, how'd I end up here again? I was doing so good. Well, part of the problem is that there are hidden sugars in so many of our foods. The manufacturers are doing it on purpose. They're literally, calling sugar by different names. There's 80 plus names for sugar. So they're using different names for sugar. They're putting like 5 different kinds of sugar in the products because they have different names. So you don't catch it. I mean, they're super sneaky. And if you
Sneaky sugar. It's like,
oh,
it's in the ketchup, it's in the salad dressing, it's in the
totally. Yeah. So this is
saying it's only when you look closely and you know all the different words that you even realize, oh my gosh, I'm getting all this sugar I didn't even realize.
yeah. And so it's like you can self-sabotage and not even realize why. So this is literally 5 days of learning how to read the labels, how to spot the other names for sugar. And then of course, we talk about like yummy sugar substitutes like stevia, monk fruit, things that I find are God's gift to emotional eaters because I love sweet. So I make great like pumpkin pancakes. I make great foods, that don't have any sugar in them but still are sweet and yummy. And so I give people recipes. We do sweet swaps. So we have like a lot of different days of sweet this and sweet swaps, and sweet seduction. We talk about sweet temptation. So emotional eating is definitely one of the classes where we talk about sweet sabotage. That's what it is. So we talk about self-sabotage on one of the days because that does get people into so much trouble. And so we go deeper than just learning how to quit sugar because most people have quit sugar. Knowing how to read the labels is super important, but equally important is dealing with our emotional connection to sugar because you can say you want to quit sugar, but when sugar has been keeping you propped up for so long, when it's your major reward system, right? When it's the thing you think about for the whole afternoon until you get off of work so you can go get the thing you want to buy and go home and eat. There is an emotional connection as well to sugar. So we have morning mindset calls each day. So I address that mindset shift that people make because you can say I want to quit sugar and then never show up because you're like, but how do I do that? I don't know how to live without it. I show you how to live without it. How you literally, and again, part of that is the sweet swaps, knowing that there are other ways to get your sweet that's not addictive. And I think people don't realize how addictive sugar is. So if you do end up eating it, either consciously or unconsciously, because it's hidden in your food, you've just blown it and with all intentions of eating clean. So there's a lot to cover. We cover it all. We do it in community. We just have a lot of fun. We have prizes each day for the people who show up and play full out. There's a whole workbook that comes with it. It's just really, really sweet. So, if anybody has a sense that, come January 1st, they're going to need some support. This starts at the beginning of the year, and it's a great thing to do.
Well, I'll definitely share a link so everybody can go check it out and sign up and to join you because that sounds especially like, just a great place to start. I find that with my patients, one of the best places to start that I always guide them is in their blood sugar balancing and this sugar addiction. Because if we're on this sugar roller coaster where, like you're saying, sugar is so addictive, and so we keep having it, it raises our blood sugar, then it dips, and then we want more of it, and we're on this roller coaster all day. And the sooner we can get off of that sugar roller coaster, the sooner we're going to be able to solve our health issues. And
Absolutely.
so I think it's a really brilliant place to start. So I'm so glad that you offer that. And one of the things I want to come back to is what I love is in all of your work, you are honoring the love of food still, and that food can taste good. Because I think that a lot of times with someone who's been in the diet culture and dealing with emotional and stress eating, there's this thinking that, oh, I can't just eat stuff that doesn't taste good or tastes like cardboard, or, or how am I supposed to not love food? And I think what you're saying is you don't have to not love food. You can still love food and you can still eat food that tastes good, but it doesn't have to be taking control of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I still love food. I enjoy food. I just do it in a way that I don't get triggered or I'm not in self-sabotage because I'm eating hidden sugars that are making me crave, because sugar is so addictive that if it is in your food, you don't know it, you're going to end up craving eating sweet things, or sugary things. And it can take you down the road you don't want to go down, even with the best of intentions.
Yes, absolutely true. And you're reminding me, because in my path, also in my personal journey, I've worked through some of these things, and it's so great listening to you, because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when I had that realization, or when I made that shift for myself, and how much of a difference it made for me and my relationship with food over time. And so it's wonderful, because I can see how much you're helping people and how much of a difference this can make for someone, not just in their, even in just related to body weight. Of course, it can definitely help with body weight, if that's a concern for someone, but it can make a huge difference in all different health issues, from anxiety and depression to autoimmunity to digestive issues to even chronic infections. And one of the things I work with is, chronic HPV for women. All of these things benefit from finding a loving way to feed ourselves. And so I really want to acknowledge and honor you for the work you do, and how amazing that is for people.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And it is so true. Like I will say about what might come up for somebody is I don't want to deprive myself, and it's like you just mentioned, all these different things that come from eating foods that don't support our health. I always say to people, let's do a reframe on deprivation. Like, what are you really depriving yourself of? Like chronic fatigue, inflammation, prediabetes, low energy, right? Depression, anxiety. Like, I think I would like to deprive myself of those things.
Yeah, so it is these shifts in. It's like we have to put it out in front of us and really see what's really the truth, and then shift our perspective and start living and practicing a different way of relating to our food and like you said, it's really our daily routine in general. And so powerful. Oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to talk with you today. Thank you so much for joining me, Tricia. And
thank you
to share about your 5-day quit sugar challenge, and for people to get even more benefit from your wisdom.
Thank you. It's been great to be here. I love you. I love your message and how you support people. And I'm excited to have you on the Heal Your Hunger show next week.
I'm excited. I can't wait. All right,
thank you.
Soon then.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to How Humans Heal. If you liked this episode, leave a rating and a review. And for more resources, visit drdonnie.com.